Horror Story: Nightmare's Embrace. I've seen my fair share of peculiar occurrences throughout my life, but none have haunted my memory quite like the events that transpired during my sophomore year. In those days, I was utterly captivated by the enigmatic world of ancient folklore and dark mysticism. Clutching a fistful of cash, I eagerly acquired a plethora of spellbinding tomes, delving into the secrets of arcane rituals and forbidden arts. My fascination was matched by an old confidant of mine, whom I'll dub Old Jake. In the heart of our sleepy town, there lay a patch of land rumored to be raised for a towering edifice. It was there that Old Jake's two prodigies, entangled in a web of curiosity, came forth, whispering tales of forgotten graves and unearthed remains, beckoning us to partake in their audacious quest. We were young and heedless, pedaling on our bicycles to that unhallowed ground. My eyes had previously glimpsed the sinister sprawl during my halcyon days in elementary school, a landscape pockmarked with solitary tombs. Although the soil had been torn asunder in most parts, a few graves defiantly clung to their macabre secrets. It was one such grave that we sought, a stone enclosure standing in lieu of a wooden casket. Its stony walls bore an enigmatic tapestry of obscure symbols, resembling crimson trails of blood. Fueled by brazen curiosity, Old Jake's prodigies hurled themselves into the tomb, brandishing a bone, the skeletal remnant of a long-forgotten soul. I beheld the bone, its origin unmistakably human, a femur, perhaps. Despite their insistence that we too seize a relic, Old Jake and I recoiled, feeling an inexplicable taint of ill fortune. With a sense of futility shrouding our senses, we hastened our departure, unaware of the malevolence that awaited us under the cover of night. That fateful eve, I succumbed to sleep's seductive embrace in the darkest hours, around the stroke of one. Yet my respite was short-lived, swiftly eroded by an otherworldly oppression. I pried open my eyes to behold the ghastly visage of an ethereal, wizened figure, a spectral apparition hauntingly close to my own countenance. It interrogated me relentlessly, its voice an eerie refrain. "Why trespass upon my domain?" Fear constricted my heart, my words stumbling forth in a torrent of apologies, desperately attempting to assuage the unseen presence. In a fit of spectral fury, it lunged at me, unleashing a tempest of agony, a violent tempest that threatened to rend my very being asunder. A subtle shift of my head, prompted by the arrangement of my pillow, dissipated the apparition like smoke, dissolving its oppressive hold. Alas, my respite was ephemeral, for I beheld my prized dream-catcher shattered asunder, fragments of its ethereal weave scattered haphazardly, and to my horror, the taste of iron filled my mouth. A realization that I had unwittingly bitten the root of my tongue, an act synonymous with possession and malevolence. Trepidation gripped my soul as I contemplated the ramifications of succumbing to slumber once more. Thus, I endured the relentless march of night, clinging to my phone's pallid glow, my companion through the long and harrowing vigil. When the sun begrudgingly revealed itself once more, I sought solace in the presence of Old Jake. His countenance bore the scars of a sleepless night, a mirror image of my own restless torment. With trembling voice, he recounted his nocturnal ordeal. A strange specter had tapped at his window, the audacity of its intrusion defying the laws of gravity. Mind you, his abode was perched on the 4th floor. Neglecting the sacred ritual of drawing the curtains, a ward against evil influences, he bore witness to the unnerving countenance of an old man, incessantly rapping on the windowpane. Swiftly, he grabbed the hallowed wooden blade, stashed conveniently near his pillow, and sought refuge within the sanctuary of the bathroom. Having evaded immediate peril, he cautiously returned to his room, drawing the veil of darkness over his eyes. The next morning, Old Jake's mother casually mentioned an odd occurrence, the sound of glass being tapped upon during the midnight hours. Fatigue had clouded her judgment, leading her to dismiss the disturbance without investigation. The convergence of our shared experiences, illuminated by the day's light, sent shivers cascading down our spines. Wielding a handful of incense sticks, we ventured back to that forsaken grave, seeking to mend the tenuous bond between the living and the dead. And so, peace was restored, our lives spared from an ungodly fate. However, the two younger adventurers, forever entwined with that night's malevolence, vanished into the annals of obscurity. It wasn't until much later that we realized the dire consequences that would have befallen us had I not clung to my dream catcher, or if old Jake's mother had opened the window. Some mysteries are better left undisturbed, for they hold within them a terror too profound to fathom. Horror story: My grandmother. My grandmother is 88 years old and has 4 sons and 1 daughter. She has lived her entire life in a small village. Her health has been fairly robust, but 6 months ago, she mentioned that she wanted to prepare her funeral clothes. Since I don't live with my grandmother and rarely visit her due to my marriage, I didn't see her often. One day, while chatting with my family, I asked about my grandmother's recent health. My mother assured me that she was doing well, very strong. She mentioned that if my grandmother were to pass away one day, it would most likely be due to a brain problem. Sometimes, she would even point to a corner of the yard and say to my aunt, who is my grandmother's daughter, "Your grandma is standing over there." My aunt would dismissively reply, "Stop talking nonsense. There's no one there." My grandmother would then give a faint smile and remain silent. At the time, we all thought that my grandmother's age was catching up with her, so we didn't pay much attention to what she said. It seemed like an insignificant remark. 6 months later, during dinner, my grandmother suddenly said she wanted a drink. She hadn't had alcohol for several years. My aunt thought it strange that the old lady requested it, so she poured her a small amount. My grandmother picked up the glass, took a small sip, and then the glass slipped from her hand. She said, "I'm not well," and immediately collapsed. The family panicked and wanted to take her to the hospital, but my uncle disagreed, saying it wouldn't make a difference. Her time had come, and going to the hospital would only prolong her suffering. The hospital was far from the rural area, a 2-hour drive. However, my aunt insisted on taking her to the hospital. Finally, when we arrived at the hospital, the doctor said there was bleeding in her brain, and it was too severe to treat. Unless she underwent a craniotomy, there was no hope, but even then, she would only survive a few more days. Eventually, the surgery was performed, and although my grandmother couldn't speak, she understood what was happening. Since I was a girl, my grandmother had never liked me, only favoring her grandsons. But I never minded these things. Every time I returned to my hometown, I would buy many things to visit her. Now that she was ill, I continued to accompany her in the hospital, busy with various tasks. Strangely enough, despite having so many grandchildren, she didn't respond when others called her, but when I called her grandma, she suddenly responded. After the surgery, the doctor prohibited her from drinking water or eating. She survived for 3 days. My uncle, who was away at the time, also rushed back. No matter how we called her, she wouldn't open her eyes or speak. On the 4th day, the family decided to bring her back home. We said, "Grandma, let's go home." Upon hearing those words, my grandmother's hand moved, as if nodding slightly. We all cried, realizing that the old lady didn't want to be in the hospital. She wanted to go home. We packed our things to prepare for the journey home. As everyone was busy getting ready to leave, I turned to my grandmother. When she had her cataract surgery at the age of 70, one eye always remained closed. But as soon as I approached her, she suddenly opened both eyes wide. Very suddenly. Both eyes were wide open. I was the first to see her eyes open, and I exclaimed, "Grandma is awake." Everyone looked at my grandmother. She opened her mouth as if trying to say something, but no sound came out. And just as suddenly, she closed her eyes. And with that, she took her last breath. On the day of the funeral, it started snowing in the morning. It was the heaviest snowfall I had seen in over 10 years. The snow continued to fall until the coffin was lowered into the ground. Afterward, I returned to the city. I kept dreaming about my grandmother. At first, I didn't pay much attention, thinking it was because I missed her, but I kept dreaming about her. I asked my family if they dreamed about my grandmother, and they said they didn't. I dreamed that my grandmother said she was thirsty and wanted a cup of water. Another time, I dreamed that she was hungry and wanted to eat. I even dreamed that my grandmother came home, accompanied by a very small dwarf-like figure. But she came back naked, and I asked her about her clothes. Those days, my whole body felt sore. I told my mother-in-law about it, and she consulted someone who had knowledge in such matters. The person had no idea that my grandmother had been in the hospital, and my mother-in-law didn't mention it. The person told my mother-in-law that when my grandmother opened her eyes before passing away, I was the first person she saw. She didn't eat or drink anything, and she passed away without even wearing clothes. It suddenly dawned on me that my grandmother really hadn't eaten or drunk anything during her 4 days in the hospital. She passed away before she had the chance to put on her clothes. This was her way of communicating with me through dreams. Later, I bought offerings and warm clothes. I drew a circle at the crossroads, lit incense, and burned paper money for her. As I did so, I spoke many words from my heart, telling her to eat and drink, and if it wasn't enough, I would use my own money to buy more. Finally, I couldn't look back and went home. Incredibly, on that very night, I dreamed of my grandmother. She didn't speak. She just smiled faintly and then became blurry. In the dream, I heard her say, "My granddaughter truly cares for me." Since then, I hardly dream of my grandmother anymore. I was her favorite grandchild while she was alive. When she was sick in the hospital, my brother didn't go to see her, and she didn't see him before she passed away. The family said my brother wasn't respectful toward my grandmother, but only I was respectful. I didn't understand what they meant by being respectful, but the events were undoubtedly real. There was no exaggeration or falsehood in any of it.